So hello everyone, welcome Stane. Stane Straus is a managing director of Polymer Banknotes Limited. He's a co-author of several award-winning publications on polymer banknotes, has appeared on several news networks including CNN and BBC, and is currently authoring a new book on polymer banknotes, which I think will come out in 2021. He is also a director at large in the International Banknote Society, the IBNS, and Stane also curates the Polymer Collection, the world's most advanced museum-quality archive of polymer banknotes and related material. Stane is based in Slovenia, so welcome, Stane, and I hope we can have a conversation about your collection.
Yeah, thank you, Arnas. Thank you for having me here.
Our pleasure. So, how did you start to collect, Stane? When was it? How long you collect already?
I guess I started collecting when I was really young, maybe 6-7 years old. I started with coins and then moved on to banknotes. And then when I was a teenager, I started focusing more and more on polymer banknotes, which started appearing about at that time in 1980s, 1990s, because I thought that this is really a new technology which will spread around the world. And I guess I was right, because more and more countries nowadays are using polymer banknotes. So I thought I could be the first and the best in this collecting area, because pretty much any other collecting area you want to collect, you had these older collectors who were there before you, and this was something new.
What an interesting insight at that age, and now I can say it seems to me, from my perspective, that you're at least in one of the best and arguably the best collector of polymer banknotes.
Well, there are several very advanced and strong collectors of polymer banknotes, several of them my colleagues or catalog co-authors. So I guess we are somehow competing with each other, of course, in a friendly way. I would think that my collection is the best in terms of the diversity of material. Having the largest numbers of varieties that are out there. However, a few other collectors might have a bit more specialized collections in certain areas, like special serial numbers. They are very strong in certain countries and so on.
Stane, actually, for the broader audience, because many people refer to what we collectors or people in the industry refer to as polymer banknote. Many people say it's a plastic banknote. So could you actually tell what is a polymer banknote?
Yes, basically a polymer banknote is made on a polymer substrate, or if you want to call it a plastic substrate, as opposed to what we are used as paper banknotes, which are basically produced on a cotton substrate. So polymer is a much more durable substrate. It lasts 4 to 5 times as long compared to paper cotton substrate. It's much harder to tear it. In terms of counterfeiting and security features, I would say that both polymer and paper offer the same level of protection. However, polymer, with its hallmark clear window, offers many more exciting possibilities for the development of security features in the future. I think that in the future we will see more high-end security features being developed exclusively for polymer.
Okay, and I know there are windows, the transparent windows. These are at most polymer banknotes I have seen. So what are other features that you would include in polymer? Let's say you would include on a cotton substrate. Are there any other features?
Well, let's say most of the security features that you find on polymer banknotes, you find on paper banknotes and vice versa. Of course, the clear window is a hallmark feature of polymer, and it's not so easy to replicate it on paper. Some have tried producing hybrid banknotes by cutting out a part of the paper banknote, creating a hole, and then placing a polymer strip over that hole. And basically, they are borrowing a very effective security feature from polymer. But of course, if you want to have a clear window, why not go for the real deal, which is a polymer banknote? Why do you need to replicate it on paper? In terms of other security features, most of security features you will see on both substrates. And there are some, of course, that are exclusive to paper, like a security thread, a traditional security thread in the paper banknote.
Okay. When did the polymer actually started to emerge? When probably idea was very, very early on, I would assume in kind of early 20th century. But when was the first actual production and or conception of the polymer?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first trials on polymer were made in 1970s in Australia. Australia at the time experienced a lot of high-end counterfeits on their paper banknotes. So the central bank thought it's time to try something new. And after a few initial trials, they actually went for polymer and tried to develop the technology. So I can show you some very early samples on polymer. This is one sample here. So this is a transparent plastic here. And this is a very sort of primitive security feature that they experimented on at that time. And you should remember, this is about 50 years old already.
Looks like QR code.
Yes. And this is a little bit more advanced, and many collectors will recognize this Queen Elizabeth. That's why I like it so much. This is an optically variable feature. They were trying different methods how to sort of produce some optical variability, which will be hard to counterfeit. And this is then a more advanced actual substrate for polymer with a more advanced security feature here, optically variable device. And this is the one that actually appeared on the first Australian banknote, which was issued in 1988. Before that date, in 1980, the American Banknote Company issued some banknotes in Haiti, on Tyvek substrate, which was again another polymer substrate, non-transparent, but it didn't last long. The last Tyvek banknote was retired in 1988 because they had certain technical difficulties. So this polymer technology did not leave any sort of influence on subsequent development of polymer technology.
Stane, as far as I'm aware, there are two different producers of polymer substrate, which is CCL and De La Rue.
Yes, correct. CCL Secure produces Guardian substrate on 3 different locations in Australia, the United Kingdom, and Mexico. And De La Rue produces their own Safeguard polymer substrate in the United Kingdom. There is also Goznak, which uses their own substrate, which doesn't come with a trademark. And at this point, we believe they are using commercially available substrate, on top of which they apply their own security features. De La Rue and CCL Secure would use a in-house production of polymer, and the security features on that substrate are the essential and inseparable part of the banknote. So they treat their substrate as a high security material, and it's not available commercially.
I don't know if public is aware, but is that the case with English banknotes? Now, Bank of England, they use two different substrates on the same series. So you can take £10 banknotes, which is in polymer, and it's actually two different materials.
Yes, correct. So the decision by the Bank of England was to split the substrate into two different materials. And for a normal person using this banknote, you cannot tell the difference. So basically, it doesn't really matter because both substrates have to conform to same technical specifications as determined by the Bank of England. So even it doesn't matter for circulation.
I know there are different types. So there's Guardian, Safeguard, Duranote, Tivek, and Bradwick. Are these only patent names and the brand names, or there's any fundamental difference in those?
Yeah, there is a fundamental difference. So Tyvek and Bradwick are basically the same substrate, which is non-transparent. I have an example here of Bank of England banknote, which was produced. This is on Duranote substrate. And Bank of England was testing this substrate as a possible polymer substrate, but they decided not to use it. And when you mentioned Tyvek and Bradwick, this is a banknote on such substrate from Cyprus. Again, this was a test only, and the Bank of Cyprus never put this banknote in circulation. And the interesting thing about this substrate is that it's not non-transparent. So there are no clear windows on this substrate. And because the ink does not stick well on this Tyvek substrate, and because the substrate was also prone to delamination, which means you could actually peel it off sometimes into two separate banknotes. This technology didn't last more than about 8 years.
Sometimes somebody comes to Spink and brings a error banknote, and you can just find out that it was rubbed off. I heard that on some banknote series, you could have actually rubbed the numbers off, serial numbers off.
Yes, actually, you can rub off anything from any banknote, including paper banknotes. So you can rub off security features, inks. However, it is easier to do it on polymer because the underlying substrate is so durable, it's virtually indestructible. So whatever chemical, whatever force, whatever abrasion you apply on polymer banknote, it will remove the top layer, basically the ink and security feature, but it will not damage the underlying polymer substrate. If you try the same thing with a paper banknote, you will also remove everything. However, you will also damage the paper substrate, so it will be obvious that there was some sort of damage inflicted on the banknote. In the case of polymer, I guess some people are playing with this and trying to deceive other people by making fake errors.
So we'll have to pay extra attention to that. Thank you actually for letting us know about it. Regarding polymer technology, the development process has to be so different. So as a first instance, I imagine instead of rolls of paper coming, like in Money Heist, it has to come rolls of plastic, or is it slightly different than that?
Yes, well, CCL, Secure, and De La Rue use very different manufacturing processes for their polymer. So basically, with CCL, Secure, and the Guardian substrate, you have a large balloon which is 2 or 3 stories high, and this balloon comes down at the end and produces a polymer sheet. And basically, from that point on, the production is quite similar to the production in De La Rue, and both substrate manufacturers would then apply security features on that substrate. So, for example, this is a Guardian substrate, with security features already applied. And you can see there were some inks applied and clear windows and so on.
In regards to normal banknote production, you would make a lot of different test notes, let's say test notes or design notes. You would present it to authorities. Authorities would pick the one they actually like the most, and then you would go into production line. With polymer, would you do the same chronology of steps in sense of producing physical trials, or would it all be digital?
Yeah, I think this process is no different for a paper or polymer banknote. It will sort of depend on the issuing authority and the extent of their involvement. For example, there are some central banks which have sort of in-house R&D facilities for security features, testing, assessing the substrate, banknotes in circulation, and so on. And of course, there are central banks which have none of that, and they have just a very basic knowledge. So for this large group of central banks, they would basically outsource everything to a printer. They might tell them, we want this kind of security features, we want this kind of colors, and we want this kind of images on banknotes. But everything else in terms of technical preparations is left to the printer. And this printer, most often, they would produce just a digital image of the proposed banknote, or they would produce the printout, which would be sent to the bank for sign off by the governor. However, in some cases, the central bank is much more involved. They would request advance trials on the real substrate by different printers. They would make a thorough assessment of these analyses, and this could go on for maybe 2-3 years before they decide on how to proceed.
And with polymer banknotes, of course, one of the most evident features is the durability. So I hope any central banks are watching it and they'll make the decision to go to polymer. Also, there is falsifying. So could you talk, why is it actually so difficult to falsify?
Well, I would say that falsifying polymer is more difficult than falsifying paper. Printing on polymer is more difficult. You will have more technical difficulties with applying print, inks, security features on polymer substrate. It's easier to do it on paper. There's much more printing experience on paper, inks, printing machines, the knowledge, everything is basically adapted to paper. So polymer is more challenging. Secondly, polymer is easier to verify. So in every banknote, you would have different security features on different levels. Some security features would be meant for general public and some for central banks only. When the banknote is in circulation, despite having maybe 20 different security features on it, people will recognize one or two. And for polymer, the clear window, the complex clear window that we are seeing nowadays on banknotes is very easy to authenticate for members of general public. So this is basically an instant and easy verification, whereas on paper, you do require a little bit more knowledge and it takes a little bit more time compared to polymer.
Stane, I'm sure in your collection there should be one special piece, one special banknote that you're holding. Is there one?
Yes, of course. There are several very special banknotes to me. And some, for example, are unadopted designs. So this is an unadopted design for Bank of Canada $50 banknote. This was one of the early trials they made. At the end, of course, as we know, they adopted a different design. So this is always very special to have. And this is, for example, another one from Venezuela on Duranote substrate. I will show you another one on Guardian for the Netherlands Antilles. So this is the country that never had polymer banknotes in circulation, yet here is a polymer banknotes.
Wow, that is impressive. It must be really difficult to actually get it as a collector. I don't think many collectors get their hands on.
Correct, yes. These kind of banknotes would normally be available maybe in a handful of pieces, and some are considered unique or near unique with maybe 2 or 3 pieces known.
Stane, thank you very much for joining the interview. I appreciate very much spending time with us and actually explaining to the collectors and to the public. I'm sure that many people will understand much better polymer banknotes and collecting. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnas, for having me.
Take care, Stane.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.